Hi, today we have another personal trainer on, so I'm really excited to show how Team CBT can be used in many different genres of life, not just for doctors and therapists. And today, Greg is going to talk to us about empathy and how vulnerability is an important piece in that, and sharing a little bit of ourselves can really help us connect with others. So I encourage you to listen. We're going to get into it right now. Welcome to Talking Team CBT, where you'll hear stories from therapists and clinicians around the world on their journey and experience with Team CBT. Hi, Talking Team CBT listeners and viewers. Today we have Greg on from the UK, and he's a personal trainer who uses CBT tools to help transform clients' health and fitness. So welcome, Greg.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you got into team to begin with.
Obviously the team element was mainly the podcast, the team, pure team. But back in the day, early 2000s, Feeling Good, Feeling Good was a real transformative book for me, and Feeling Good handbook. And so, that led to the team. So I've always been a David Burns admirer. And I think the thing is about Feeling Good is, apart from the great tools, is the empathy that comes across, and the vulnerability. So that's always really impressive to me. And I think that's the thing about David Burns, isn't it? He has this vulnerability. And I recall one time I was about to do a big healthy living day. I was taking 20 lawyers out to a stately home, and I was extremely nervous. I was so nervous that I thought about crashing the car so that I wouldn't have to do the
That's
talk.
pretty nervous.
And yeah, really nervous. And so David Burns, I read in one of the two books that he used to get so nervous that he would hope he would get sick before big talks. And so this was really powerful for me, and still is. And David is, he epitomizes team, doesn't he? So I found that very attractive. The way also he says people pile on anxiety on top for thinking they shouldn't feel anxious. So, I realized that you should feel anxious, a certain amount of anxiety. So that book and David Burns' whole vulnerability is very appealing. And that's still a lot of the appeal for me.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. It's not often in a book you can feel empathized with, because it's kind of a book. But what you're saying is that that you aligned with his stories. Like, you're like, this guy gets it, because you got so anxious you were going to crash your car, and he's so anxious he wanted to get sick. So there's that connection that happens, which translates into, this is the way we need to be, this vulnerable piece of team. So that's what kind of drew you to it. Awesome. Well, you've been doing this for a while. Can you tell me what's something that's improved in your work with clients, that in your personal trainer and you use some counseling tools? Can you tell me something about how that's been going for you?
Yeah, you know how it is. If you work with people and you're trying to help them, it's a constant battle. You will always, you think you're getting somewhere, and then you're blindsided. People aren't doing their homework. And I would give an example of pre-learning, counseling skills or listening skills, and of my own terrible empathy. I was struggling with a client. They said, I can't do the homework. They said, I'm busy at work. My boss is giving me a really hard time, and I feel overwhelmed. And I was so frustrated now with this lack of homework happening, that I'd read somewhere, somebody said something like this: you can either make excuses or get results, but you can't do both, right? So I thought, I'm going to say this. This is the moment. This is going to transform. This will transform the situation.
Sure.
So I said that. So I said, well, you can make excuses or get results, but you can't do both, right? And she said to me, Greg, that 7-minute workout you mentioned, it's only 7 minutes and it's really powerful for improving your health and fitness and all that. I said, yes, it's the Johnson & Johnson 7-minute workout. And she said, I'm not going to even do that. and I never saw her again.
Oh no.
Yeah. So, we fail all the time, right?
Mhm.
So I think post learning counseling skills, I think it was pre five secrets. I might just say something like, if they say something like that, I'll say, I'm sorry to hear that you're having such a tough time at work. Your boss is giving you a hard time and you feel really overwhelmed. I'm sorry to hear that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I know that you really want to reach these goals, etc., etc. And so that pure listening, not problem solving, not giving a meme, has been transformative for my work.
I love what you're saying. And I think that while it seems like it's more likely to be a coach problem, I know I did health coaching, I still do health coaching and life coaching. The memes are all over, right? These like Facebook groups and hi, these mantras and all this stuff. And they can really fall flat at the wrong time, and certainly empathy is not the right time for those things. And even sometimes during methods advice giving doesn't work out so good, even though we are coaches and we're trying to help a client move forward. But we see that in therapists too, actually making that mistake and trying to boister up their clients and give them this little, something to make them feel better, and it does fall flat. So I would imagine we do letter grades in team. I imagine that was kind of a D.
It was a D, yeah, it was a
Yeah.
D. So I think asking for the grade is super important as well. And I think um, I think the thing that makes me so passionate about empathy is actually, apart from professionally, how to me it's the golden thread that runs through everything. The
Mm-hmm.
empathy, you have to fall back to empathy when you're getting stuck at any time. Fall back to empathy. But I think what motivated me to really learn the five secrets is more experiences I had when I was dealing with other professionals.
Mm.
So everybody has a bad day, but what happened was I broke my spine and fractured my spine in 2003, and I tried a lot of different things. And I just have a list here that I gave. It's just a list of things that I tried over the 15 years. And so I handed, by the way, we all have bad days. I'm not criticizing this person. I
Right.
have bad days. She has bad days, okay, or
Right.
he, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so basically, this is the list she had, the things that I tried, right? So manipulating frequency, intensity, and type of exercise, cessation, reintroduction of combinations of different types of training, yoga, Pilates, swimming, cycling, strength, mobility teacher training, ice swimming, Wim Hof breathing, mindfulness teacher training, changing the bed, changing the car, changing the bike, spinal injections, cupping, osteopathy,
Mm.
chiropractic, needling, counseling, and Man United sleep coach. That's a big football team. And she said on reading this, Greg, I think you've taken a very passive approach to this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So Angela, it's difficult to express how upsetting that was. I
Yeah.
suppose because I prided myself on the fact I was tenacious. I was not going to give up. I
Mm.
was going to keep going. I was even being creative. I would not stop.
Right.
So the effect of this was horrible. It was just a horrible, horrible effect. It was a visceral thing. But the
Mm.
great
Yeah.
thing was, I mean, I was angry. I was upset. I felt
Sure.
humiliated. I felt
Yeah.
horrible. But then a week later, I went to see my GP, who I'm sure isn't. In fact, I've spoken to him since. He's not five secrets trained, right? But this is what he said. So he's got the same list, right? So he looks at the list and he says, "It sounds like you've tried almost everything.
Mm.
You've had this for 15 years. And it says here that you're a personal trainer. How have you managed that? That must have been really tough. Tell me more
Wow.
about that."
Wow. There's quite a few secrets there, isn't there?
Right? And,
Yeah.
so the first example, I feel not heard, not understood, not respected. And the second one,
Mm-hmm.
I left his office walking on air. It was
Mm.
amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's good for our listeners to hear that There's some things about these 5 secrets. David articulates it very well and succinctly and makes it his own. But the concepts behind them, the reason they work is not because David just invented them, but because they actually work. There's something that's just intuitive in human nature, this need for connection, to be heard and really, understood. And I think a lot of people really believe that they're there until they're not, until they actually ask someone. Because I'm sure the other person who told you, oh, sounds like you're taking a passive approach, I'm sure they thought personally they had good empathy, but you walked away really deflated.
Yeah, and I think, it's not just, I think I'm bad at it sometimes. Everybody's bad at it. It's not really natural. But I think that one of the reasons I'm so passionate about David's system and team is that she could have solved that problem very, very quickly by saying to me, have I understood your situation? What grade would you give me? And
Yeah.
say, it's an F.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
so that's the genius of the 5 secrets. I find it extremely powerful. And also in my relationship with my wife, I as couples do, we have your arguments and so on, and fallings out. But one time I said, look, why don't we try this? We'll get the actual sheet of paper out with the 5 secrets, and we'll try it.
Right.
And so we were trying to do it. We're trying to do the 5 secrets on each other. And I said, what grade? She went, C, and then I tried again. She's like, D, D. And then it tried again. She's like, B, right? So I thought, wait a minute. What is it David says? He said, what is the music behind the words? The master cue.
Yeah.
So I said, I think I've got it. I said, you feel underappreciated. And she went, A plus 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 plus. So it's very powerful when you manage to use it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that example about how you use the what's my grade in a personal interaction. I think we're often, I know I was very intimidated. It took me a year before I would use it. Like I knew I was supposed to, and I kept using the feedback form because I do feedback before and after every session. And so I'd be like, well, I'll just wait for the feedback and I'll see if it's a 20 or if it's a 19, because we're, for those of you who don't know, we look for a 20 out of 20. And so I would always just wait for the number because I was too intimidated. And then I started using it here and there and getting a little less intimidated. And then when I started doing 3-hour sessions, I had to use what's my grade because I couldn't wait 3 hours to find out if I was connecting with the client. So I love that, that you're doing that interaction with your spouse. And just for our listeners and viewers, what's my grade is just a simple tool that we actually ask the person we're talking to, could you give me a grade? Like, how am I understanding you? Could you just give me a grade? I know that sounds like a little weird question, but just, would it be a B or a C or how am I getting you? And most people are pretty quick to just give you a grade. It's actually pretty simple technique, but it just seems intimidating to use at first.
Yeah. And I think also it's very, I mean, David says the ego has to die for you to do good work sometimes, and meaning I suppose you have to face something really quite scary. Nobody wants to be told that they're getting a B or a C, but I suppose it's humility again, isn't it? You have to not think you know everything. That you've got to say, maybe I'm getting this wrong, and if you don't, you can't move on, can you? I think that's the key to getting closer, having the humility to say, look, how am I actually doing? It's a great sign that you're not entirely sure if you're doing well. So it's extremely powerful.
Yeah. You mentioned this interaction with your list and this other person, and then you mentioned the part where you got a D trying to give advice. I wonder if there is some tools that you've liked about team that kind of helps you prevent that. I think you mentioned something about a triple paradox when we were talking before the interview.
Yeah. So in habits, if somebody's say overeating or drinking more than they'd like to, then there's something called the triple paradox, and that's where if we one way of producing the start of it is by saying, if you could press the magic button and stop eating off plan or drinking alcohol or whatever the habit is, would you press it? And they might say, well, no, I wouldn't. And you say, well, why not? And then you've got your first column of what's called the triple paradox. And it's paradoxical because rather than the client will often think you should be persuading them why it's bad to drink too much alcohol, right? And sometimes there's a visible, like, what are you doing? And I can think of a good example where one of my clients was drinking quite a lot. She was doing well in her fitness, she was doing well with weight management, but the drinking was affecting her, her mental health, and also the weight management and the training too. So she was drinking maybe 1 or 2 bottles per day, and she wanted help. And so I said, well, let's look at the positives. Magic button. Let's look at the positives of this habit you have. And she said, well, there are no positives. There are no positives. And I said, really? So magic button. So you don't look forward to it then? She said, well, no, I do. No, I do look forward to it. Is that important? Yes, it is. Do you enjoy the flavor of it? Yes. No, I do enjoy the flavor of it. Yes, I do. Anything else you enjoy? Well, I suppose it helps me be more social. Is that good? Is that important? Yes. So we came up with a big list of positives. We also looked at, in the second column of triple paradox, you also look at the disadvantage of stopping. So that's often the converse of the first column. And then you look at, in the third column, what does it say about your values? You like to look after yourself, you're social, and so on. So once you do that, you then say, look, given all these amazing benefits and what it says about your values, it's brilliant. Why would you want to stop doing this? And in this case, there was a moment, of pause. So I'm not feeling very good. I just don't feel good. I feel as though my skin's not as good. I really want to get my weight down. I want to be fitter. And so she came up with a convincing, reason to change. And so what we did was, in the spirit of team, the T is for testing, isn't it? Now, we weren't using pure team. I was using this in a coaching way. So I was what I do is I'll ask people, what has your mood and motivation been out of 10, 2 numbers over the last period of time? So she came up with the number, said, my mood and motivation has been about a 2 or 3 out of 10 for the last 6 months.
Wow.
So, whoa, it's like, that is, whoa, right. So she duly stopped the drinking, and we monitored her mood and motivation every week. First week, it was about a 7 out of 10. Second week, it went up to an 8 out of 10. And then the third and fourth weeks, it was a 9 to a 9.5 out of 10.
Wow.
So it was super powerful. But I have to say, I'd love to tell you that that's the end of that story, Angela. But unfortunately, it isn't. And I think when I tell you what then happened is she went back to drinking, right? She went back to drinking, still maintaining fitness, still maintaining weight management. And that is where I think one of the most powerful team techniques, which is not trying to help. Right. Even though we know we've got you feel going, but the data shows that the desperation, you can feel like, we know how to help you.
Yeah.
But you can't do that. You've got to sit with open hands. If you want help, it's there. But at the moment, she doesn't want help with it. So isn't it such a powerful tool, Angela, the not having to feel you have to help?
Yeah, and it's not just for the practitioner, which is great. I mean, it definitely takes a load off, but it's also a benefit to the client because you're not judging them. And often in life, we get judged everywhere we turn, especially with social media nowadays. And this sitting with open hands creates a very non-judgmental place. And some clients actually, stick with what they want to do, but at least they don't feel judged. And others actually end up coming back because they didn't feel judged. I've heard stories of people coming back 6 months or a year later and saying, you know what, I think I do want to work on this now. And they're willing to come back because they knew there was no judgment there. And so I think that's really a really important piece. The sitting with open hands. And that motivation, I like the mood and motivation. That's a great scale. And in team, we would use, we call it the willingness scale. So it's very similar flavor. And the great thing about team, what we've said all along, we've been doing this series and other people have said the same, is that the great thing about team is it's a framework and you can pull on any tool that works for what you're working on in your modality and your niche. And if you're doing fitness and health, that makes total sense that you would use tools from that industry. Well, we have a few more minutes left. Yeah, I'm trying to get in maybe one more question here before we get to our final one. Let me see here. Hold on a second. I might edit this out. Trying to find my notes.
I could, maybe a useful tip I found to be extremely useful is, Angela, well, it's not a team method though, that's the thing. It's how I use mood and motivation. It's how I use it. It can be quite powerful. Do you want to know this? Yeah.
I'd love to hear that.
So, I've done about 21,000 one-to-one sessions, and I will actually check mood and motivation prior to each session and afterwards too. And I think, as David says, anti-procrastination method is the action leads to motivation, right? So it's such a powerful tool, isn't it? So what I do is I'll check mood and motivation pre-session and after session. And this is just to test people for the motivation fallacy. They believe that this exercise, they need to be motivated beforehand in order to get, to do it. It's the other way around, right? Yeah. So I've checked mood and motivation thousands and thousands of times, and invariably, the lower somebody is in the mood and motivation score before, the higher the number goes afterwards. It's a very powerful method. So if you're doubting, if you're feeling about exercise like, oh, I won't enjoy it, do mood and motivation, and you can disprove your theory that you need to feel motivated before you do the exercise.
Yeah, I love it. That's bringing in an experimental technique, right? Where we create an experiment to see if there's some fallacy to my thinking. So that's the great thing about using multiple tools, and we don't have to just follow our hero and guru David, but he's very open to other people pulling in tools that are helpful in work. He's definitely given me a lot of support when I use faith-based tools with clients, and so more power to you for using mood and motivation. I love it, Greg.
Thank you.
Well, this question we ask everyone, and that is, if everyone, we usually say therapists, but clinicians, life coaches, personal trainers, if all of those people in the health industry were listening, what's one thing about team you'd like them to know?
Well, I have to say, I think we've covered it. I think we've covered the 5 secrets. It's the 5 secrets, right? Yeah. The disarming, the thought empathy, the feeling empathy, the I feel statements, the inquiry, the stroking. But I would say that is an absolute game changer, because without it, I think you can't use the tools. So I would say that's the one that I would go for.
Well, that's great, Greg. And I think that's so true, that if we don't connect with our clients, how will they trust us when we go on to other methods? Whether we're doing training or coaching or therapy, the client needs to have some trust and be able to say what's working and what's not working. And it's hard to do that if the empathy isn't there first of all. Well, thank you so much for being here, Greg. We really appreciate you coming on, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Angela.